There's a lot to love about Thanksgiving. You know, I love the turkey and the stuffing. I love pumpkin pie. I love spending time with family and playing football in the backyard. But the best part about Thanksgiving is that it prompts so many of us, even if it's just for a moment or two, to reflect on what we're really thankful for in life. Have you thought about what you're thankful for this year, in this November? In keeping with the spirit of Thanksgiving, timeout.com, which is like a parenting website, asked New York kids ages 2 to 12 what they were thankful for. And there's nothing more adorable, I think, than asking a child a serious question and hearing their candid response. Lexi, age 7, from the Upper West Side, said, "I'm thankful for my family and friends, and I love to read, so I'm thankful for books, especially Diary of a Wimpy Kid." Griffin, age 4, from Brooklyn, said, "I'm thankful for red apples. The green ones will make you sick." Elijah, age 3, says, "I'm thankful when bees don't sting me, but when they do, mud feels me better." Mud feels me better. That's how he said it. Jay-Z, also age 3, said, "I'm thankful for my rock moves." And Kenzie, age 9, I have to pause and take a deep breath for this one, says, "I'm thankful for everything good and bad that has ever happened to me. The good makes the bad okay because the bad isn't really bad because there's so much good. So maybe I'm really just thankful for the good since there really isn't any bad. Ugh, I've confused myself. I'll just say I'm thankful for my sister's rock moves." There are a few more serious ones, like Anna, age 10, who said, "I'm thankful for a safe, warm home and a full refrigerator." Jackson, age 9, from Manhattan, says, "I'm thankful for my grandparents and uncle who have slept at our apartment since Hurricane Sandy." Jillian, age 12, says, "I'm thankful for the doctor who fixed my heart." See, I'm convinced that the human spirit shines most brightly when it's cloaked in gratitude. G.K. Chesterton put it this way. He said, "I would maintain that thanks are the highest form of thought, and that gratitude is happiness doubled by wonder." And the truth is, when you choose to see life through the eyes of gratitude, it changes everything, especially ourselves. I like how Rochelle Goodrich put it. She writes, "Gratitude paints little smiley faces on everything it touches." And as you know, the Bible has a lot to say about thankfulness and thanksgiving. It encourages and even commands us to be thankful, to give thanks in all circumstances. The word thanks itself appears in the Bible in 100 verses, at least in the NIV. And one of my favorite occurrences is found in Psalm 95. If you have a Bible with you, go ahead and open it up to Psalm 95. That's where we'll kind of camp out today. But it begins this way, and it's hard for me. See, growing up in the non-instrumental churches, we actually put this song or this psalm to song. We sang it as like a hymn, and so it's really hard for me to read it out loud without singing it. I'm not going to put you through that today, though, so I'll do my best just to read. But he writes, "Come, let us sing for joy to the Lord. Let us shout aloud to the rock of our salvation. Let us come before him with thanksgiving and extol him with music and song. For the Lord is a great God, the great King above all gods. In his hands are the depths of the earth, and the mountain peaks belong to him. The sea is his, for he made it, and his hands formed the dry land. Come, let us kneel down and worship. Let us kneel before the Lord our Maker, for he is our God, and we are the people of his pasture, the flock under his care." Now maybe you haven't been feeling very thankful lately. You know, maybe life hasn't been going your way and your gratitude has been replaced with grumbling. You know, I think even the best of us go through that sometimes. But in this psalm, the author not only invites us to come into God's presence with thanksgiving, but he offers us 3 reasons why we should be grateful to God. Regardless of your situation or your circumstances, each of us can give thanks for these 3 things. So what do we have to be thankful for? Well, first, we can give thanks for God's character. God's character. After inviting us to come before him with thanksgiving, the psalmist says in in verse 3, because the Lord is the great God, the great King above all gods. He starts off with God's nature, his character. It's not so much about any particular thing that God has done, but rather about who God is. And in a word, God is great. Everything about him is great. His love, his mercy, his patience, his presence, his fullness, his forgiveness, his faithfulness. It's all great. One of my favorite contemporary Christian hymns is Chris Tomlin's "How Great Is Our God." And when Chris, I read an interview about that, when he sat down to write the song, that's all he could come up with at first is the question, the chorus, how great is our God, sing with me, that's it. That's all he had. How great is our God? And then it was like a question hanging in the air that he couldn't quite answer. He said in the interview that he stopped and he prayed to God. He said, God, this is all I have, Lord. There's no other words. I can't summon anything in the English language to describe how great you are. And he searched for a long time for an answer to that question. But who could really blame him, right? How do you describe the greatness of God? How do you describe a God that's too beautiful for description? Or what do you say about a God that's too marvelous for words? Or what do you even think about a God that's too wonderful for comprehension? Another psalm puts it this way. Psalm 147 says, He counts the stars and calls them by name. How great is our God! His power is absolute. His understanding is beyond comprehension. Have you ever tried that, by the way? Counting the stars, I mean. About 300 years ago, astronomers thought they had it figured out. They knew how many stars there were in the universe, and it came up to about 1,500. 1,500 stars in the universe. Since then, we've counted a few more. Today, we know that there's at least 300 billion stars in our galaxy alone. Now, if you went outside and you had the most powerful telescope you could find and you started counting the stars, one per second, it would take you 2,500 years to get through all the ones just in our galaxy. You couldn't do it in a lifetime. But God can. And not only does He, but He calls them by name. That's how great and how awesome our God is. That's a God that we can be thankful for. See, we don't want a small God. We don't want a God that we can control. We want a God who controls the universe. One that can never be conquered or even fully understood. We want to shout with the psalmist in Psalm 145 that says, Great is the Lord and most worthy of praise. His greatness no one can fathom. No one can fathom. See, here we are discussing how great God is and what His greatness is like. And we're trying to wrap our heads around something that's so deep and so vast that it can't be grasped. It's immeasurable, unsearchable, beyond discovery. We're worshiping an unrivaled, uncontested God of infinite might and power and glory and awe. There is no one like Him. And aren't you thankful for that? No matter what else is going on in our life, we can give thanks for God's character, His infinite, unfathomable greatness. And next, the psalmist says that we can be thankful for God's creation. God's creation. Harriet Martineau was a renowned sociologist and novelist. She was also an atheist. She didn't believe in God. And one morning, a beautiful fall morning, she and her neighbor, who happened to be a Christian, were sitting out on her porch enjoying a cup of coffee together, just talking away. And Harriet saw the brilliant sun, peeking through the haze and the frost on the meadow and the brightly colored leaves falling lazily to the ground. And she was just overwhelmed by the wonder of nature. And she just burst forth, I'm so thankful. I'm just grateful for all of this. And her friend, without missing the moment, leaned in and said, "Grateful to whom, my dear?" And for Harriet, that question just hung in the air, unanswered. But the psalmist answers that question for us in verses 4 and 5. Again, he wrote, "In his hands are the depths of the earth, and the mountain peaks belong to him. The sea is his, for he made it, and his hands formed the dry land." Every mountain peak, every drop of rain, every blade of grass, every falling leaf gives us another reason to give thanks to God. And the universe and everything in it was custom tailored by a God who expresses his imagination in swirling galaxies and mellowing sunsets and glistening snow. Anytime you feel the sun on your face or the wind at your back or the ocean splashing on your feet, you can pause and give thanks to God for the creation that he's made. You know, we've got several outdoorsmen and sportsmen here in the church, and some call it Mother Nature, others call it the great outdoors, some call it God's country, but whatever you call it, I don't think you can spend a lot of time outdoors without quickly noticing the fingerprint of God on creation. You know, whether you're seated in a deer stand at dawn or cutting across a smooth lake for a day of fishing or watching a mountainside for an elusive elk, you're faced with the realization that there's just no way that all of this could have happened by accident. You know, behind it all, there had to be someone who put it all together. And the Bible actually says, this is in Job when he's conversing with his philosopher friends, and they said to him, "Ask the animals and they will teach you. Ask the birds and they will tell you. Or speak with the earth and it will teach you. Even the fish will relate the story to you. What creature doesn't know that the Lord's hands made it?" The life of every living creature and the spirit in every human body are in his hands. God handcrafted this world and every living thing in it, including you and me. And the psalmist in Psalm 95 touches on that too in verse 6 when he says, "Come, let us bow down and worship. Let us kneel before the Lord, our Maker." He's not just the makers of the heavens and earth. He's our Maker, the same God who scooped out the oceans and sculpted the mountains, created you and me. You're not an accident, or a byproduct of irresponsible parents or a fluke of nature. You were handmade by God himself. God prescribed every detail of who you are. He deliberately chose your ethnicity, the color of your skin, the color of your hair, the color of your eyes, how long your fingernails would grow. You know, he decided every little detail about you. He custom made you the way that he wanted you. Your life is a miracle. You were fashioned and formed by the God of all creation. He's big enough to breathe out the stars and sculpt the mountains, and yet intricate enough to lace together the trillions of cells that make up every facet of who you are. If you're looking for something to be thankful for, be thankful that God created you. You know, the world around us and your life in particular is a gift from God. So let's be grateful for God's creations. And finally, the psalmist urges us to give thanks for God's care. He starts with God's character and then moves into the things that God has made, and then he talks about God's care, the things that God provides for us. One of Charles Schulz's classic Peanuts comic strips features Charlie Brown carrying this bowl full of Thanksgiving leftovers, turkey and gravy and stuffing and all that, out to Snoopy, and he sets it down on the ground and says, "Here you go, Snoopy, happy Thanksgiving." And Snoopy thinks to himself, "Oh, thank you." And he thinks, he doesn't talk, he's a dog, he doesn't say things, but he has a little thought balloon so you know what he's thinking about. And he says, "Oh, thank you." And he's got this big crooked grin on his face and his tail's wagging behind him. And then he looks down in the bowl and his tail stops wagging and his smile drops and he looks up and he said, "What, no cranberries?" I think we have a tendency to do the same thing. We look at our bowl, our life, and we focus on what's not there, rather than being grateful for what we've been given. The psalmist urges us instead to give thanks for all that God provides. In the last verse, he said, "Let us come before him with thanksgiving, for he is our God, and we're the people of his pasture, the flock under his care." the flock under his care. See, just as Charlie Brown dutifully cares for his dog, the Good Shepherd tends his flock. In other words, God didn't just set creation in motion and leave us to fend for ourselves. He cares about us. He continues to be involved in the affairs of human life. He provides for our needs. He lacks nothing, and He gives everything. Everything that we have is a gift from Him. The time that we have on earth is a gift from God. The energy or mobility that we have that enables us to get up and go to work or come to church is a gift from God. The talents or skills by which we earn an income are gifts from God. The combination of all these things, our productivity and our accomplishments, are gifts from God. Our purpose in life is a gift from God. Our families, parents, grandparents, a good husband or wife. I've been trying to tell Ashley for years that I'm a gift from God. Our children are gifts from God. Our homes, the covers to keep us warm on a cold winter night. Friends with whom we can share our joys and sorrows are all gifts of God. And when we count our blessings, we shouldn't neglect our spiritual ones either. Salvation, redemption, forgiveness, eternal life, second chances, Jesus Himself. They're all gifts of God. And the list just goes on and on and on. We could stay here all day. I'm reminded of a 4-year-old boy who was asked to pray before Thanksgiving dinner. And the whole family clasped their hands and bowed their heads in expectation. And as he began his prayer, he started thanking God for his friends, naming them one by one. And then he thanked God for Mommy and for Daddy and for his brother and his sister and for all the aunts and uncles. And then he began to thank God for the food. And he thanked God for the turkey and for the dressing and for the fruit salad and for the cranberry sauce and the pies and the cakes and even the Cool Whip. And then he paused for a moment, and everyone waited, hoping that he was about to say amen. But then, after that moment of silence, he leaned toward his mom and he goes, "Psst, if I thank God for the broccoli, won't He know I'm lying?" It just goes to show you, though, that we have so many things to be thankful for, even broccoli. As author and poet David Spur once said, when we consider all God's gifts and all that we possess, a grumbling mood gives way to thankfulness. Let me close with a story Max Lucado shared. Before he became a famous author and pastor, Max was a missionary in Brazil. And he said that one day when he was walking along the streets on his way to the university for class, he felt a tug on his pant leg. And turning around, he saw this little boy about 5 or 6 years old with dark, beady eyes and a dirty little face. And turning toward the big American, the little boy said, "Bread, sir." It was a little beggar boy. And the streets of Brazil are full of them. Usually I turn away, Max writes. But because there's so many that you can't possibly feed them all. But there was something so compelling about this little boy that I couldn't turn away. And so Max invited the boy to follow him into a coffee shop where he told the owner, "I'll have a cup of coffee and give the boy a pastry, whatever he wants." And since the coffee counter was at the other end of the store, he just walked on and he went over there to get his coffee, assuming that the boy would grab his pastry and disappear into the street. But he didn't. And Max just stood there at the coffee counter until he felt little eyes boring into him. And he turns around, and as he does, the little boy's just standing there, holding his pastry with 2 hands, looking at Max, his eyes right about belt buckle level. And then slowly they come up until he sees this big American right in the face. And he says, "Thank you, sir. Thank you so much." Max said that he was so touched by the boy's thanks that he would have bought him the whole store. "I sat there," he writes, "for another 30 minutes, late for my class, just thinking about a little beggar boy who came back and said thank you." God has given us so much more than a pastry. Let's not forget to come back and say thank you. Regardless of your situation or circumstances, we can give thanks for God's character, God's creation and God's care. And as our worship team comes forward to lead us in this next song, I want to invite you to do just what the psalmist writes here. Let us come, let us sing for joy to the Lord. Let us shout aloud to the rock of our salvation. Let us come before him with thanksgiving and extol him with music and song. Let's stand and sing together, church.